Every wild animal on Earth follows the same rule. Stay away from humans. We are, statistically, the most dangerous species this planet has ever produced. We hunt them, we trap them, we pave over their homes, and yet every single year, there are cases of wild animals doing something that makes zero evolutionary sense. They swim toward us. They approach us. They seem to ask, somehow, for help. In December of 2005, a diver named James Mosquito got a call about a humpback whale tangled in crabline off the Farallon Islands. When his team reached her, she was wrapped in more than 20 crab pot lines, hundreds of pounds of equipment dragging from her body. She'd been pulled almost completely underwater, unable to surface for air. One flipper was bound so tightly it was cutting into the skin. For about an hour, divers worked underneath her with curved knives, cutting line after line while a creature the size of a school bus stayed motionless beneath them. A whale that could have killed every diver there with one flick of her tail just floated and let them work. When the last line came free, she didn't swim away. She circled back. She nudged each diver gently with her nose, one at a time, before finally heading out to open water. That's not an isolated story. Off the coast of Hawaii, divers have documented something similar with manta rays for years. Mantas occasionally show up to dive sites with fishing hooks buried in their gill slits or line wrapped around their wings. Instead of fleeing, they slow down. They hover near a diver, sometimes flipping onto their backs, holding still in a way they never do for anything else. Almost presenting the injury, waiting for hands that have no business being that close to a wild animal twice their size. Dolphins do this too. There are multiple recorded cases of dolphins entangled in fishing line approaching boats and swimmers directly. In one case off the coast of Florida, a wild dolphin swam up to a group of snorkelers and stayed at the surface, completely still, until someone noticed the line wrapped around its fin and cut it loose. And it's not just marine animals. In parts of Kenya and Zimbabwe, wildlife rangers have documented wild elephants with snare wounds approaching vehicles, slowing their pace, sometimes standing within a few feet of a truck. Behavior they show toward almost nothing else that moves on four wheels. Some of these elephants had been treated by rangers years earlier as calves. When they reappeared, injured as full-grown adults, they came back to the same kind of vehicle. There's an even stranger version of this involving seals. In 2010, a fisherman off the coast of New Zealand had a fur seal pup leap directly into his boat while a pod of orcas circled nearby. The seal didn't try to swim to shore where it would have been safer in theory. It went straight for the one thing on the water that the orcas couldn't follow. People who study marine predator behavior have logged similar incidents for years. Seals and sea lions using boats, docks, and even surfers as a kind of moving safe zone in the middle of an active hunt. They're not asking humans to fight off the predator. They're using us as terrain. So what's actually happening here? Are these animals capable of understanding that we, specifically, can fix what's wrong with them? That would mean something genuinely strange. It would mean a wild animal is making a calculated decision that the most dangerous species on the planet is, in this one moment, safer than the alternative. For decades, most biologists wouldn't even entertain that idea seriously. The leading explanation is something closer to associative learning. Animals don't need to understand intention. They just need a pattern. A whale caught in line for hours, slowly suffocating, eventually reaches a state where the fear response gets overridden by the cost of staying still and drowning. At that point, anything that might relieve the pressure becomes worth the risk, human or not. The seal jumping into the boat isn't reasoning about kindness. It's running a much older calculation. Anything is better than an orca. Marine mammals add another layer to this. Whales, dolphins, and seals didn't evolve around large land predators the way elephants or deer did. Their threat calculus around surface activity is built differently. A boat, a diver, a human silhouette in the water doesn't trigger the same automatic flight response that a human on land triggers in, say, a deer with a broken leg. Some researchers think that gap is part of why marine species show this behavior more often than land animals do. There's also the question of brain size and social complexity. Humpback whales, dolphins, and elephants are three of the only animals on Earth confirmed to recognize individuals over years, form long-term social bonds outside their own family group, and in the case of dolphins and elephants, pass a mirror self-recognition test. Researchers studying animal cognition argue that this kind of social intelligence might let certain species generalize trust from one safe encounter to a completely different situation, with a completely different human. That would explain the Kenyan elephants. A calf treated once by a ranger as a juvenile might carry forward a loose category in its memory. Vehicles like that one didn't hurt me. rather than a specific memory of any particular person. It's not full comprehension. It's pattern recognition running on an unusually capable brain. But here's where actual scientists get cautious, and where this story gets a lot less magical. Most of what looks like an animal asking for help might be something far simpler happening in our own heads. Humans are exceptional at reading intention into behavior, even when none exists. A manta ray slowing near a diver might just be reacting to bubbles, not begging for assistance. A whale circling back to nudge a diver might be doing exactly what whales do after any disturbance. Researchers who study these encounters are explicit about this. Confirmed cases of animals seeking out specific help from specific humans are rare, and most of what circulates online as a heartwarming rescue story has at least some narrative added on top of footage that's genuinely ambiguous. The whale didn't necessarily know divers were the solution. It's entirely possible the whale just associated stillness near large moving objects with relief from pain, and stayed still near the first large moving objects it encountered. And there's a darker statistical reality underneath all of this. For every documented case of an animal approaching a human for help, there are thousands of animals that died in silence from the exact same kind of entanglement, snare wound, or predator chase, never coming near a person at all. These stories aren't typical behavior. They're outliers. They're rare edge cases where fear, exhaustion, desperation, and unusually high social intelligence happen to line up at the same moment, which actually makes the question more interesting, not less. Because the animals that do this tend to share something specific. Long lifespans, complex memory, strong social bonds, the capacity to recognize individuals across years. These aren't randomly distributed traits. They cluster almost exclusively in the species we already suspect of having the richest inner lives on the planet. Elephants, whales, dolphins, even seals in their own way. The same animals that grieve their dead, that comfort injured group members, that appear to recognize themselves in mirrors. Maybe that's the real pattern here. Not that wild animals understand humans are uniquely capable of helping them, but that the same cognitive machinery that lets an elephant mourn a dead calf or a dolphin protect an injured podmate occasionally generalizes outward toward a species it has every evolutionary reason to fear. It's worth sitting with how rare that actually is in nature. Trust isn't the default state for any wild animal. It has to be earned across millions of years of close calls, and broken almost instantly by a single bad outcome. So when it does appear, even briefly, even by accident, it tends to show up in the species that can afford to be flexible. The ones with enough cognitive overhead to occasionally override an instinct that's kept their entire lineage alive for millions of years. We don't know what a whale is thinking underneath 100 feet of crabline. We don't know if a manta ray flipping onto its back near a diver is making a decision or just reacting on instinct refined over millions of years. What we do know is that somewhere out in the ocean, in the brush of an African savanna, animals that have absolutely no reason to trust us occasionally do anyway, for reasons we're still only partway to understanding. And maybe that says less about how smart they are and more about what kind of minds are capable of trust at all. Because trusting something dangerous, even once, even briefly, isn't a small thing. It might be one of the rarest decisions in nature. And every time it happens between a creature that could easily kill us, and one that, for just a few minutes, chose not to be afraid.